Hi, I'm Ahmed Shabuddin, filling in for Femi Oke, and you're in the stream. Today, taps in the Brazilian megacity of Sao Paulo may soon run dry. We'll look at how it's affecting residents' lives and if the government is prepared. Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here as always with your feedback. Malika, this is obviously a story that affects the entire world. Everyone's thinking about this. Lots of people think that wars will be fought over this. What's the community saying?
I would say that people are talking about this with pictures, and of course they speak more than 1,000 words. So I'm going to show you this from reporter John Lyons, who tweeted this picture saying that water equals money. This is in Sao Paulo, and this is where they have money to fill up water trucks. On the other hand, this is from Al Jazeera's very own Gabriel Elizondo showing the water crisis. This is kids and elderly who are without water and have to fill up their buckets with that. So we want to delve into this in today's show. We want to do it with you though. So tweet us your questions and comments with hashtag AJStream.
Hola, my name is Enrique Morones. I'm the executive director and founder of Border Angels, saving migrant lives. And I'm glad to be in the stream.
Brazil's Sao Paulo state is experiencing the worst drought in more than 8 decades. To meet demands, the region has been draining its most important water supply, the Cantareira Reservoir. And now that source is running dangerously low. The Cantareira is said to be at less than 4% of its capacity, where once water levels rose several meters above ground, dried, caked earth remains. And some of the 13 million people who live in Sao Paulo have been reporting scattered water shortages. In some small towns, the need for water is becoming acute, with residents lining up for hours. In the nation's financial hub, Sao Paulo City, people are being encouraged and incentivized to conserve water. But how did Brazil's largest state get to this point? Too much pressure on natural resources or political mishandling? To discuss this and much more, I'm joined by Thaisa Scanzerla, a Brazilian journalist who's been following the issue. We also have Camila Pavanelli de Lorenzi, a blogger and concerned citizen, Rubem Lalena Porto, advisor to the Strategic Board for Water and Sanitation in the Sao Paulo government, and from Kentucky, Keith Schneider, senior editor at Circle of Blue, an organization that provides stories from the front lines of environmental issues. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Camila, I want to start by asking you a kind of a basic question. I know you're not a journalist, but you're obviously very passionate about this. You've been posting about this a lot on social media. You told our producers that you're freaking out. Why are you freaking out?
Well, I've been following the news on the water crisis since the beginning of the year. But one of the reasons that I've been freaking out is that I feel like a lot of people still believe that, oh, we'll be fine. The government will find a last-minute solution, including people who have already been experiencing water cuts. And what you just said a couple of minutes ago that the Cantareira system, the reservoirs are at 4%. That's not really true, because what happened is we're now getting water that's never been captured before. It's never been collected before. We've been using what is called the dead volume. And this water has never been actually used for human consumption before. Some specialists have claimed that it might be contaminated with heavy metals such as cadmium, mercurium, lead. And so this is what we have right now, water that's never been collected before. And not only does this water poses some obvious risks for everyone's health, but what other specialists say is that by collecting all the water from the Cantareira reservoirs, the soil gets so dry that when it rains, the rain is not enough to fill up the reservoirs. Right. The soil will absorb this water, and so yes, I mean, I think it is a critical. We are at a very critical point.
And you know,
some people, we've had some citizens in the favelas in the outskirts of town. They've had to dig holes to find some water, and they've been using this water to cook, We've had media reports of that.
Course.
So
and Camila,
if this is not enough reason to freak out, I don't know what is.
Right. And Camila, I'm not ridiculing the fact that you're freaking out, but we're hearing mixed reports. There seem to be, two sides of this. Citizens are concerned, obviously, and we have seen those photos that Malika showed at the top of the show. People digging holes in the ground, looking for water. I do want to ask you, Thaisa, it seems as though there's more and more criticism of the government in the media in recent days and weeks. But the governor of Sao Paulo said earlier this week that water rationing is not needed. How do they back up this fact? I mean, what do you think is needed? And are you as concerned as Camila?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm freaking out as well. I mean, as a Sao Paulo citizen, not just as a journalist, because like she said, nobody knows how safe that volume water is, or if it's safe at all. I mean, nobody ever captured it. Nobody ever used it. No human ever consumed it before. But obviously, there are some global factors at play here. I mean, deforestation and climate change for a start. But I think what most people are angry about right now is the lack of honesty of the state governments, of not warning the people since the beginning of the year of the gravity of this situation, of the seriousness of this situation. I mean, all they did was do some campaign about saving water and don't take a long shower.
So you don't think the government's doing anything or enough to address this?
Yeah, I think not enough. Seriously, they still maintain their position that water rationing plan is not necessary. I think this is completely crazy. And they still deny there was a systematic water interruptions in the city. What they said, I mean, yesterday, that parts in the city that are high in the hills, those parts may experience some sort of interruptions. Yeah. But I don't know. I think this is really systematic. It's not just an accidents or random stuff. Well,
we asked someone from Sabesp, Sao Paulo's water and waste management company, the largest in the world actually, to come on today's program, but they declined. They did, however, send us this statement. Sabesp informs that there is no water rationing or any consumption restriction in any of the 364 cities operated by the company in the state of Sao Paulo. The creation on February 1st of a bonus for customers supplied by Cantarera customers who reduce their consumption by 20% earn 30% discount on your water bill. Sabesp does not work with the possibility of rationing. Considering all the measures taken, the supply is guaranteed until March 2015. Rubem,
isn't it funny?
Rubem, she says it's funny. No, 1 second, just 1 second.
That's it.
Camila, we heard from Thaisa, we heard from Camila. You think that it's funny. You're freaking out. Rubem, is the government not doing enough? What do you make of their points?
Well, it's very difficult for humans to accept the power of nature. This is the same as Hurricane Sandy in New York, with the earthquake in Fukushima, and so on. What is undeniable is that the main reason for the water crisis in Sao Paulo is hydrology, lack of rain. Just to put you some numbers, unfortunately, I'm engineer, nobody's perfect, so I have to deal with some numbers. The mean flow to the Cantareira system is about 40 cubic meters per second all over the year, the annual mean. Yeah. And the worst drought we had in the past 85 years was the drought of 1953, and we had at that time 23 cubic meters per second. This was the worst drought we had. And the drought of 53 was used as, let's say, a reference for the design of all reservoirs in Brazil. Not in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. water power reservoirs, water supply reservoirs, all of them were designed, were dimensioned using, let's say, what happened in 1953.
So
in 2014, we had a mean of 13 cubic meters per second.
So Ruben, where does that leave us today, though? I mean, I appreciate the contrasting, and it's important to kind of provide some context as to where we are today. But of these, kind of criticisms that we hear from our guests that we just heard from, do you think that they're fair, that the government isn't taking this seriously? We just read the statement that they provided, but, we've also heard reports of audio recordings that leaked where the president of Sabesp reportedly said she received orders from superiors not to alert the population about the severity of the crisis. So talking about today, I mean, do you feel they're doing enough?
Well, they are doing a lot. They are doing a lot. And I can say what they are doing. They are doing more than they declared, and I cannot comment because I don't know. I just read in the newspaper the news that about the communication, and I believe that it was a lack of communication. Which is serious.
Well, Ruben, I hear you say that the government is doing a lot, but I'd like to go to Thaisa and hear what she has to think, what she has to say about that. But Thaisa, take into account these tweets that we're getting in. Mariana on Twitter says the Sao Paulo government knew the situation and didn't do anything about it. And others are sharing their own personal experiences. Ruben, I hear you, but just one second. Others are sharing their experiences. So Jackie says, I lived in Sao Paulo for a year, and my worst memory is the stench as a result of the sewage problem. Another person sent us a video comment, and I'd like you all to have a listen to this.
I've been living in Sao Paulo City since 1993. I've never seen a situation like this. About the consequence related to the water shortage, the taste of water is like mud, and here in my building we're trying to save water and to recycle it when we launder our clothes, for example. The situation is really awful, and I hope the rain will come soon.
So Thaisa, you heard Ruben say no, that's not true, but in this video comment she says the water tastes like mud. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, sure. Well, the water in my house, the water in my house, the water in my house as well, it really stinks. I mean, it's really weird. I've only been living in Sao Paulo for almost 3 years, but still I haven't seen that before. But about that, I wanted to ask a question to Ruben. I mean, was this drought predicted? I mean, did engineers and climatologists knew about this drought in 2014 that would happen in 2014 and 2015? Because from what I understand, Sabesp knew it by 2012, and what the company limited itself to do was to warn its investors in New York. Still, they haven't warned the population of the seriousness of the situation, and we're already almost in November of 2014. So that's the only thing I wanted to know. Was this drought predicted? And if it was, why was not this addressed with the population?
Ruben?
Okay. Up to now, we don't have the technology to predict a drought. You can read the last issue of Veja Sao Paulo, an interview with maybe the most prestigious meteorologist in Brazil, and he says that we don't know if what's happening is due to climate change or an anomaly that we cannot explain. It's impossible to predict a drought.
So on that point, forgive me, I just want to bring Keith in. I don't want to cut you off, Ruben. You can come in because you're saying it's impossible to predict a drought. There are some people who make that very same argument. But Keith, if you had to cite why this was happening, I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that in Brazil, where the Amazon is the biggest river in the world, that they're having this situation. Is it impossible to predict a drought? And what would you cite as the main factors for this? We heard deforestation mentioned earlier, for example.
Well, you can't predict droughts, so we don't have capacity to predict droughts, but you can look at what is available water supply and the population growth. Sao Paulo has grown very fast over a very short amount of time. You have also a situation in that state, which is the largest grower of sugarcane that's irrigated, so you have a very significant contest for water between one of Brazil's most important farm sectors and its largest cities. And then the last piece is governance, and we've talked about governance, but there's no government in the world, or very few governments in the world, that are now responding to these kinds of crises at the scale and the pace that they're occurring.
Is it just apathy, Keith? I mean, what's that about? Is it just, you know, short-sightedness?
Well, it's two factors. One is that not only are we in the era in which these kinds of crises are occurring, we're also in the era of civic indifference. We have climate change, but in most of the world, nobody's responding to climate change. We have water scarcity, clearly in the United States, what's happened in Atlanta 2 or 3 years ago, what's happening now in California, right as we're talking, what's happened in Texas. The era of indifference is important because government is only going to respond to how people are concerned. And in this country, and I'm listening to this conversation, and in Brazil, even if it was known that it was occurring, how much change were people ready to embrace in order to prepare for it? So we had a political saying at the beginning of the Obama administration, change that you can believe in. But what I'm finding in my work all around the world is change that you can believe in is essentially no change or very modest change. Were people in Brazil ready, or Sao Paulo ready, to embrace the very significant changes in water conservation that are now, you know, expected?
Well, speaking of change, I mean, Keith, to your point, you know, we're looking at drastic changes across, you know, the country. If you just look at this in Sao Paulo specifically, of course, you look at this image, it's obviously been circulating online. This is an image, you know, just in 1 year, I believe, or maybe even 6 months, forgive me, it's in 6 months. You see the image at the top, you see an entire lake, and of course, it is dried up. And there are towns literally running out of water. The town of Ito, with 160,000 people living there, is an example where that's happening. We also spoke to Al Jazeera's Gabriel Elizondo earlier, who told us about his visit to that town, a place that's been very severely affected by water shortages. Take a look at this.
You know, and I asked people, and we were there, and, you know, I asked them, you know, can I film you? Can we talk? And they said, yeah, sure. And the thing that several people said was humiliating. And that really stood out because it is. I mean, it's the most humiliating thing a person has to do is, you know, go to a dirty stream to get water out of a pipe just to cook and to take a shower. And it was sad, and it was powerful. And I thought to myself, I mean, as a journalist, we don't give opinions. But I did, as I left there, I said, you know, this shouldn't be happening in Brazil. Brazil's the world's 7th largest economy. This should not be happening here. And so something just felt wrong with that.
You know, Taisa, you heard him say that people were draining pipes. So there's a solution online. Slava says, I would first drain all the private swimming pools, stop watering lawns and parks, and then start with rationing agricultural and industrial use. On Facebook, Alan writes in, I suspect the golf courses in Sao Paulo are still green. You agree with that?
Yeah, actually, Camila just she shared some graphics about the water use in Brazil, not just Sao Paulo, but Brazil, and the conclusion is like 70% of the water in Sao Paulo is used by irrigation and agriculture. And
in Brazil,
what's the best?
In Brazil.
Yeah, in Brazil. I said. I mean,
this refers to Brazil,
not in Sao Paulo. Yeah, sure. And yeah, like what Sabesp has been doing for this year is to incentivize people like normal consumers, normal citizens to you know, save water. But like we're just responsible for maybe 10% of the water use in the city. What about the industrial plants? What about the agriculture? I mean, I would like to ask Ruben this question.
Camila was going to jump in, and I don't mean to cut. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, and I don't want to detract from the point that we heard from Gabrielle. You know, and again, Ruben and Keith, feel free to jump in. But Camila, there have been riots in Ito. I mean, do you see what's happening there in terms of the shortages and the severity of the situation potentially being replicated across the state and country?
In Ito,
Go ahead,
what's happening now, right? What's happening there now is that water trucks have not been enough to provide water in adequate amounts to the population. So we've been watching the water trucks be ransacked by the people. So they've had to be protected by armed guards. So it's a pretty Mad Max-like scenario. My doubt, as a resident of Sao Paulo, is. Well, it too has 160,000 residents. And Sao Paulo, the greater Sao Paulo area has 8,800,000 people. There is an audio recording of a Sabesp official, a Sabesp director, stating that, okay, I'm going to make a joke, but this is serious. But no, it's actually a joke, but it's serious. Well, this is what he said, that if it doesn't rain this year, so next year, maybe Sabesp would have to give collective holidays to
so maybe
residents.
You feel like the government's not taking the situation very seriously. Ruben, in a couple just quick words.
Can I just add?
Yes, please, go ahead, Camila.
One other thing.
Finish your point.
Yes, one other thing is Sabesp has been Sabesp's campaign right now is, okay, everybody should save water, and of course, who could disagree with that? Well, yes, we should all be saving water. But the question is, right up until March of this year, they were giving discounts to the large consumers.
We actually have to pause, Camila, on that point. We'll have more on the water crisis in Brazil in just a few minutes. We'll continue the conversation, but first, here's Malika with a look at some other stories we're following here at the stream.
A new video is exposing what harassment feels like in New York City, and it's got more than 6 million views.
Hey, what's up, girl? How you doing? Somebody's acknowledging you. She said thank you.
Many online praised the video by Hollaback, a campaign to end street harassment. Carl tweets, "I had no idea how pervasive that problem is." Well, Lori adds, "The thing about that video is that it depicts something so familiar to me. I didn't realize it needed to be depicted at all." Well, others pushed back, saying the language is innocent. Joshka tweets, "Saying hello, ma'am, is apparently street harassment. New York City is rude enough as it is." Next to Indonesia, where a satay seller was arrested Wednesday for allegedly defaming the new president, Jokowi Widodo, on Facebook. Mohammed Arsaid reportedly edited the president's face onto pornographic images. Those images have since been removed, but his arrest sparked heavy criticism online. Nama tweets, "Anyone has the right to express their aspiration. Many exercise this exaggeratedly, but only one person is arrested." Well, some others asked to be careful what they post online. Sharifa writes, "In the past, many of Jokowi's supporters edited the other presidential candidates' pictures in worse manners, but they never got arrested." Lastly, a top cop in Jammu and Kashmir may have been outed by his own son for alleged abuse of power. Tony Baig shared Instagrams of his dad, Shakil Baig, receiving what many say is special treatment, like having his shoes put on for him. The images have since been deleted, but not before Twitter users weighed in. Gaurav tweets, "Shakil Baig's title should be suspended ASAP." We've rounded up that discussion on our website. Check it out and share your thoughts at stream.aljazeera.com. Ahmed?
Thanks for that, Malika. Obviously always following a lot of stories here and trying to follow the conversation we were just having. Obviously, it's not over. It seems we all agree that there is a problem, but the government's role in trying to solve that problem, whether they take it seriously, remains to be debated. Ruben, I know you're going to stick around with us in the post-show, where hopefully you'll have a chance to respond to that comment that Camila was making. We want to hear from you, of course, and for those of you watching, stay with us. Remember, the post-show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. On the next show here at the stream, in Canada, 2 attacks in 3 days against Canadian soldiers caught the country by surprise. But it's how the government plans to respond that's causing intense debate. We'll be talking to Canadians about the impact of these attacks. Until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back to the Streams Post Show. Today we've been talking about whether Sao Paulo, Brazil is running out of water. Let's get right back to our conversation. Ruben, you must have heard Camila making that comment about the government kind of mocking the situation, making a joke, making light of what's happening. What do you make of her comment?
Well, before that, I would like to clear some things. Itu is not operated by Sabesp, is not in the metropolitan region. It's about 100 kilometers from Sao Paulo, and it's operated by the municipality. And the problem in the region is not only Itu, is Itu and two neighbors cities, and the technical solution is known for years, which is to build a small reservoir to supply all the three cities. But the cities, for I don't know for what reason, maybe political reasons, they don't agree on the construction of the reservoir. So this is a thing that nobody can do nothing, because by the constitution of the country, the water supply is attribution of the municipality. Mm-hmm. They have the controls over the problem. If they don't want Sabesp to operate the system, they don't allow, and that's the end.
Yeah.
The other point, in Sao Paulo, 70% is urban consumption, water supply mainly. About 20% is industry, but they usually use water wells, or they take the water from the rivers directly, so it does not affect the water supply of the city. And 10% in the region is irrigation, small irrigation, let's say vegetables and things like that. And
I hear what you're saying, Ruben, but I want to bring Keith in here, because online people are saying, look, the government couldn't have necessarily prevented a drought, of course, but there are short-term solutions that we all can be working on. So Keith, I want to read a couple for you, and you let me know what you think of these. Mark on Facebook says, we need sensible rationing and education about how to reduce use. This morning, he writes, and he's writing from Sao Paulo, my neighbor was washing his car with a hose. Some people are still not paying attention. And Keith on Twitter, another suggestion, Godfather on Twitter says, another measure is to run an aggressive campaign on media, encouraging people to save water, charging extra to those who can afford it. What's a short-term solution?
Raise the price of water to the value. Raise the price of water to the value that it should be at the market. I mean, one of the most important conservation measures that any government can institute and any citizenry can institute is to raise the price of water. If you price water correctly, people will use less of it. They will use what they need. They will not waste. They will not, water their gardens, overwater their gardens. Very few places in the world price water at the value that it now is in our lives. Water is undervalued and then overused and wasted. So none of those comments said price water at the correct level.
Right, and
now what does that mean? What is that? That is a governing strategy that makes a lot of sense in terms of the economy and the available supply. But it's a governing strategy that says we're going to have to really make changes in how we operate in Brazil or anywhere else. And that's the problem with these crises, is that they're happening at the scale and the speed now that it's never happened before in the history of the world. There are more of us places that are being affected, and we are not ready as a societies to do what needs to be done to respond to these kinds of crises.
So what is preventing that from happening either in Brazil? I mean, Ruben, I saw you were agreeing with Keith, or so it seemed. Why is that not a strategy that the government's considering?
Well, Brazil, it's I can say it's a rich country, but the wealthy is not well distributed all over the country. Even in the richest state, which is Sao Paulo, there are many, the difference of income are very, very strong. So they try to keep the prices low for social reasons. And this is, I agree that the water should be more valued.
Right.
Well, I agree that the government should have approved fines for the people that spend more water than it's reasonable.
So Ruben, you and Camila and Keith seem to agree on that point, just based on Camila's nodding. Yes. And Keith, I just want to kind of end on this one point, because we hear different reasons and perhaps some deflection as to why the government's unable to solve this. We hear that there's wealth disparity, but this is common all across the world. Might the reason the government isn't being willing to admit the severity of the shortages or properly addressing this, that there's obviously foreign investment in the agriculture business and agro businesses and similar endeavors, and if I'm not mistaken, 80% of the world's water is used in farming, not in cities. I mean, is that part of it?
But you have to look at where water management fits in every governing structure. Water management, water resource. Sao Paulo had the first state water resource management law in Brazil's history. But where water management is way down on the pecking order. It hasn't raised to the top levels of governing almost anywhere. And so if water is seen as insignificant politically, and then to manage a major crisis, you have to raise you have to reach down into the bowels of those governments and raise those water management ideas and technical practices up to the top levels of management structure. Well, these are major institutions, government. It just takes time for them to raise up, and we are way back. The crises are unfolding at very high, tremendous speed and tremendous gravity. But how we're dealing with them is still seen as kind of kindergarten stuff. And it's not seen as the same kinds of priority as the economy or war or major health crises like Ebola. I mean, we have to think about these resource contests in a much more significant way in terms of their urgencies. Yeah. Because not only is this happening in Brazil, it's happening in the United States, it's happening in China, it's happening in India, it's happening across most of Africa. Almost every major energy, food supply region in the world is suffering now from some sort of water scarcity, water supply, water access problem.
Of course,
every major
a global challenge, to say the very least. Malika, any last comments coming in?
Right. Well, as we're wrapping up here, it's interesting that Keith said it's about priorities, and that's where I'd like to leave us with community, because we got this video comment from someone who says basically the same thing. I'd like you all to have a listen to this.
The water crisis in Sao Paulo has been going on for months. And because I don't live in a rich neighborhood, I don't get water from midnight to 6 a.m. every day since the beginning of the year, and it's about to get very worse. But don't be fooled. Our government knew it was going to happen since at least 10 years ago and chose this path by putting the profits of our water company into the hands of private investors instead of investing in it.
So Gustavo says it's going to get worse, but I'll read this tweet as the last one from Tim, who gives a recommendation. He says, I think it's going to be critical to get people at the poverty line equipped with the right awareness.
Most certainly. Well, at the very least, I hope that's what we've accomplished here in some small part, bringing more awareness. And, obviously the conversation on this is not going to end here. Remember, the conversation always continues online at AJ Stream. I do want to thank my guests, Thaisa Scanzerla, Camila Pavanelli de Lorenzi, Ruben Lalena Porto, and Keith Schneider for being with us. On the next show, 2 attacks in 3 days against Canadian soldiers caught the country by surprise, but it's how the government plans to respond that's causing intense debate. We'll be talking to Canadians about the impact of these attacks on their country. See you then.